My husband slapped the divorce petition on the kitchen table, threw his head back, and laughed. "You're walking away with nothing, Mara," Gideon sneered, his mother nodding smugly beside him. He thought he had outsmarted me, believing our modest joint checking account was all I had to my name. For years, they treated me like a burden, utterly convinced I was financially helpless. But what Gideon didn't know was that my late grandfather, Arthur, had left behind a legacy they couldn't even fathom. When the judge finally unsealed the trust and read the real number out loud, $28.7 million, the smug grin vanished from Gideon's face, and his mother literally collapsed in the courtroom gallery. Stay with me until the very end to hear how this arrogant scheme completely backfired, and comment the city or country you're watching from, so I can see how far my story reaches. My name is Mara. For years, I believed that loyalty and silence could hold a fragile marriage together. But in the eyes of my husband, Gideon, and his overbearing mother, Evelyn, my patience was nothing more than weakness. To them, I was just background noise, someone who took care of the house, handled their demands, and lived entirely on Gideon's terms. Evelyn never missed an opportunity to remind me that I brought nothing of value to their family name, treating every meal I cooked and every sacrifice I made with open contempt. Then came the morning, everything shattered. I walked into the kitchen to find Gideon leaning against the counter, an arrogant smirk plastered across his face. Beside him, Evelyn stood with her arms crossed, watching me like a predator cornering its prey. Without a single word of explanation, Gideon tossed a thick manila envelope onto the table. "Sign them, Mara," he said, his voice cold and mocking. "I'm filing for divorce. I've already drained the joint accounts and transferred the car titles to my name. You're leaving this house with the clothes on your back and not a single dime more." Evelyn let out a sharp, dismissive laugh. "Consider it a favor, dear. You were always living on borrowed time here anyway." I stood completely still, staring at the legal papers. They expected tears. They expected me to beg, to scream, or to break down on the kitchen floor. But instead, a strange, absolute calm settled over me. Gideon thought he had destroyed me, unaware that the game was only just beginning. As Gideon and his mother basked in their shallow victory, my mind drifted to the only person who had ever truly seen my worth. My grandfather, Arthur. He was an unassuming old-school gentleman who lived simply, drove an old truck, and spoke with deliberate quietness. Most people assumed he had little to leave behind, but Arthur possessed an extraordinary mind for discipline, quiet investments, and private wealth. More than anything, he understood human nature with razor-sharp precision. 6 months before he passed, Arthur called me to his home for a private conversation that would alter the course of my life. He placed a sealed leather portfolio on the desk between us and looked deeply into my eyes. He warned me that true character is revealed when people believe you have nothing left to offer. Arthur laid down one strict, unbreakable condition. His estate, along with its staggering value, had to remain completely confidential until legal disclosure was required by law. 2 weeks after his passing, Arthur's trusted estate attorney contacted me privately. When the sealed documents were opened in that quiet midtown office, my breath caught in my throat. Arthur had left me prime commercial properties, private corporate holdings, and liquid treasury bonds totaling a staggering $28.7 million. It was structured entirely into an ironclad private trust under my sole name. Sitting in that attorney's office, looking at Gideon's ruthless demands, a quiet resolution took hold. I wouldn't contest his hasty settlement. I wouldn't fight his petty greed. I was going to let Gideon build his own trap, brick by arrogant brick. Over the next 2 weeks, Gideon's arrogance knew no bounds. He treated our upcoming divorce hearing not as an unfortunate end to a marriage, but as his ultimate personal triumph. He bragged openly to his friends and business associates about finally cutting loose what he called dead weight, celebrating his supposed financial liberation over expensive dinners he charged to credit cards he assumed he would easily clear. Every demand he sent through his aggressive attorney became more absurd than the last. Gideon insisted on keeping the suburban house, our 2 vehicles, and every shared asset down to the furniture. To ensure I left with absolutely nothing, he drafted a ruthless stipulation declaring that I would permanently waive all rights to spousal support, future alimony, or any claim against his personal income. Evelyn arrived at the house to oversee the handover of the draft agreements, radiating pure malice. She watched with a patronizing smirk as I packed my personal clothes into modest suitcases. Handing me the settlement papers, she offered mock advice, telling me I should look into cheap studio apartments on the outskirts of town before the market priced me out entirely. I didn't argue. I didn't push back against a single demand. With a steady hand and absolute silence, I signed the preliminary waivers, relinquishing every claim to Gideon's modest accounts and heavily mortgaged assets. Gideon took the signed papers with a triumphant grin, completely convinced he had outmaneuvered me. He had no idea he was locking the door on his own future. The morning of the final hearing arrived under a crisp, gray sky. Department 4 of the County Family Court was quiet, save for the rhythmic clicking of keyboards and the low murmur of legal clerks. Gideon walked through the heavy wooden doors, looking as though he had already won a high-stakes tournament. Dressed in a brand-new tailored suit, he strutted toward the petitioner's table with his lawyer, Richard Barnes, whose polished demeanor mirrored Gideon's unchecked smugness. Behind them in the front gallery sat Evelyn, wearing a wide, vindictive smile and fanning herself with courtroom paperwork. I walked down the center aisle alone. I wore a simple black dress, carrying nothing except a plain, sealed manila folder containing the court-mandated financial disclosures prepared by Arthur's estate attorneys. Taking my seat at the respondent's table, I rested my hands calmly before me. Gideon leaned over, catching my eye with a patronizing smirk, whispering just loud enough for the bailiff to miss it. "Ready to start over from scratch, Mara?" Judge Robert Thornton took the bench, his stern gaze sweeping across the courtroom as the clerk called our case. Barnes wasted no time, stepping forward immediately to present their aggressive settlement agreement. He painted a condescending picture, describing me as entirely financially dependent and requesting the court expedite the final decree based on the waivers I had willingly signed. Judge Thornton listened impassively, then picked up the confidential asset disclosure Arthur's legal team had submitted to the docket that morning. As he broke the red seal, the courtroom went completely still. Judge Thornton adjusted his reading glasses, his brow furrowing as his eyes scanned the certified documents inside the unsealed folder. The silence in the room stretched so long that Barnes cleared his throat, clearly expecting the judge to sign off on the standard decree without hesitation. Instead, Judge Thornton looked up, fixing Gideon and his attorney with a piercing, bewildered stare. "Mr. Barnes," the judge began, his voice echoing off the mahogany walls, "you have presented an agreement where your client aggressively demands full retention of a mortgaged $400,000 home and waives all reciprocal support claims, believing he is stripping the respondent of her livelihood." "That is correct, Your Honor," Barnes replied smoothly. "The terms are mutually agreed upon." "Then I assume you are fully aware of what you are walking away from," Judge Thornton said, tapping the certified trust portfolio on his desk. "Because according to the certified estate records of Arthur Vance, unsealed this morning, Mrs. Vance is the sole beneficiary of an ironclad, non-marital private trust comprising commercial real estate, corporate equities, and liquid treasury bonds valued at exactly $28,740,000. Barnes's pen dropped from his hand, hitting the wooden table with a sharp crack. His face went entirely ash-white. Gideon's smug grin instantly vanished, replaced by an expression of pure, unadulterated shock. "Wait, what? That's impossible! Arthur was a broke mechanic," Gideon stammered, half rising from his chair before the bailiff signaled him to sit. In the gallery behind him, Evelyn let out a strangled gasp. As the astronomical reality of what they had just discarded set in, her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed entirely into the aisle, sending papers flying as panic swept the courtroom. Bailiffs rushed forward to assist Evelyn, calling for paramedics as she was helped out of the courtroom, dazed and trembling. Once order was finally restored, the atmosphere inside Department 4 had radically shifted. Gideon sat frozen, his chest heaving, his gaze darting frantically between me, the judge, and his pale-faced attorney. "Your Honor," Barnes began, his voice shaking and completely devoid of its earlier confidence. "In light of these unprecedented financial disclosures, we request an immediate continuance. My client wishes to formally withdraw his divorce petition, so both parties can pursue marital counseling and renegotiate equitable terms." Gideon leaned forward, sweating profusely. "Yes, Your Honor. Mara, please, let's talk about this outside. We don't need a divorce. This was just a misunderstanding. We can work through this together as a family." I looked directly into Gideon's desperate eyes, feeling nothing but profound closure. "There is nothing to discuss, Gideon," I said calmly to the bench. "He filed this petition with malicious intent, and I have consented to the dissolution." Judge Thornton brought his gavel down with an authoritative slam. "Motion to withdraw is denied. Mr. Barnes, your client executed binding, notarized waivers forfeiting any right to future spousal support, discovery modifications, or equitable claims against separate non-marital property. Under the strict terms of Arthur Vance's trust, these assets were protected pre-inheritance and remain solely Mrs. Vance's separate estate." The realization hit Gideon like a physical blow. By rushing to trap me with nothing, he had permanently locked himself out of $28.7 million, leaving the courtroom with only his debts and his ruined pride. I walked out of the courthouse and into the morning sunlight, breathing in the fresh air of complete freedom. Behind me, Gideon was desperately arguing with his lawyer on the marble steps, realizing that the suburban house he fought so bitterly to keep came with heavy monthly mortgage payments and credit card debts he could no longer afford. Within 6 months, Gideon was forced to downsize to the very outskirts of town his mother had once sneered about, working grueling hours just to stay afloat. I used Grandfather Arthur's legacy to build a quiet, purposeful life on my own terms. I purchased a serene home near the coast, established an educational foundation in Arthur's honor, and finally discovered the peace that comes with true independence. Grandfather taught me that patience and quiet dignity will always outlast loud arrogance. When people try to dig a pit for you out of greed, sometimes the best thing you can do is simply step back and let them fall into it themselves. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my shoes, would you have revealed the inheritance sooner or let the truth come out in court just like I did? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more real-life stories. Right now, on your screen, I've left 2 other dramatic stories from our channel that I know you'll love. Click either one to keep watching, and thank you for being here with me today.